Greetings, globeheads and flathearts. Think of a number, any number that you'd like, and divide that number by 2. Then do it again, and again, and again, and again. For example, let's say your number is 2. You divide it by 2, you have 1. You divide it by 2 again, you have 1/2. You divide it by 2 again, you have 1/4, and so forth. Let me ask you, how many times do you have to divide that number before you have 0? How many times do you have to divide it before you have a negative number? Now, anybody who's ever studied math probably knows that the answer is that's a trick question, because you will never, ever get to 0, let alone a negative number. As you divide something and keep dividing it, you keep getting infinitely smaller, but it's always something more than 0. Never can be a negative number. You just can't get there from here. And that's a lot how perspective works. Now, flat earthers have invented something that we like to call Flerspective. They call it perspective, but it's really something different. Flat earthers will rant all day long about NASA and how NASA lies. But the fact of the matter is that NASA is not their biggest problem. Their biggest problem is trying to explain why we all see the sunset below the horizon. You see, they have to come up with an explanation for this, because if the sun literally went below their disk, it would be night on the entire Earth all at the same time. And we all know that this is not the case in our modern world. This is actually what the ancient Egyptians believed. Their version of the flat Earth, the sun went down under it and lit the underworld at night. In our modern world, we travel around. We have communication with people in other parts of the world. Many of us have been to Asia and Europe and so forth, and we know that it is daytime in some places when it's nighttime in other places. We know that's the fact. And so therefore, flat earthers have to come up with some other explanation for why we see the sun drop below the horizon. And they call it perspective. But it's not perspective. It's a unique flat earth version that we call Flerspective. And here's why. Things appear smaller as they move away from you. And they appear smaller because as they move away, they take up a smaller portion of your field of vision. This is almost like fractions. Something is twice as far away, it looks half the size. And this doesn't only affect objects, it affects spaces between objects. Therefore, when you look at railroad tracks that you know are parallel, they'll go on forever the same distance from each other. But as you look down a straight stretch of railroad tracks off into the distance, these tracks appear to converge off in the distance. But they don't, and we know they don't. We know that parallel lines are parallel by definition. They never cross by definition. They never meet by definition. And in fact, these parallel lines don't even really appear to converge. I mean, we think they appear to converge because the space between them becomes infinitely small. But it never actually hits 0. And, in fact, if you looked at them through binoculars, or through a telescope, or through a telephoto lens, and you increase the percentage of your field of view that they are taking up, you're going to see further down the tracks between them, and they're going to appear to converge even further away. But this works with everything. I like to launch model rockets. In case you didn't know by my screen name, I'm a big fan of rockets and NASA and all that stuff. And I build and launch model rockets. Now, when the model rocket shoots straight up in the air, it'll appear smaller and smaller and smaller in my field of vision until it's completely gone. And this is how things disappear by getting too far away. They're still there. Photons from them are probably still reaching our eye. But it's such a small percentage of our field of vision that our brain can't detect it. And again, if we take a telescope or something and magnify it so that it takes up a larger portion of our field of vision, we can again recognize it. Now, let's talk about the sun. Let's say that the sun was moving parallel to the ground and was moving off into the distance. Everything that mankind has learned about perspective over thousands of years would tell us that that sun would get smaller and smaller and smaller. When it was twice as far away, it would be half as big. Twice as far away again, half as big. Also, the distance between the sun and the ground would appear to get smaller and smaller and smaller as it got further away in our field of vision. But eventually, it would appear infinitely close to the horizon, but it would appear to sit on top of the horizon and continue to get smaller until it was too small to detect. That is not what we see. In fact, lots of measurements have been taken, and while flat earthers will try to trick you with camera glare and all that, we know for a fact that when we look at the sun through a filter that reduces all glare, that you can track the angular size of the sun throughout the entire day, and it doesn't change. Wolfie has proven this. I think Red's Rhetoric has proven this. By the way, you should go to their channels and subscribe. But it doesn't change in angular size through the day. And worse for the flat earthers, it falls below the horizon. You can see a quarter of the sun below the horizon, then half of it is gone, and 3/4 of it is gone, and finally the whole thing is gone. Parallel lines, by definition, never cross. And you can't get, from perspective, you can't get something to appear to slip behind something else. That's not how perspective works, folks. You would simply get the distance between the sun and the horizon to appear to shrink almost into infinity, never quite hitting zero, never becoming a negative number. Never would you see those parallel lines cross, and never would you see the sun partially hidden behind the horizon unless it was literally falling below the plane, or unless the earth is curved. That is how perspective works. That's not what the flat earthers are trying to tell you. They're making up completely new rules, which we all like to call Flerspective. And they're doing this because they have to. They have no choice. Because the sunset is something that every single one of us can watch every single day. You don't have to listen to NASA. You don't have to listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson. You don't have to listen to your teachers or anything else, anybody else you think's lying to you. You don't have to listen to me. All you have to do is go out and watch the sunset, and you can see for yourself the #1 proof that we live on a globe. And what you see as that sun falls below the horizon, and when you go up in elevation and you can see it set a second time, that is impossible on your flat plane. And that's why what they're trying to sell you is nothing but snake oil. Don't buy the snake oil, people. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe. See you next time.